Well, welcome back to our Swartz Creek Community Podcast Series. Ben Meinke here from Swartz Creek Community Schools. I'm here with my gracious co-host, Adam Zettel from the city. We are excited to be able to get back to this. This year's our first podcast of 2019. We've taken several months off and I guess a little bit of a sabbatical, if you will, but we're excited to get back at it and make these podcasts more regularly as we were in the fall. So welcome, Adam, and I know I'm excited about today just being able to talk about some things that are really going to hit home with our community.
Yeah, we continue to work on a community from various angles, and it's becoming more pronounced. And to that end, the city has officially got a relationship with community image builders, Carmen Avantini, president, and Justin Sprague, vice president. This guy here, sitting to my left, actually used to work at the grain elevator in town. Has some Swartz Creek roots, knows the area well.
Job.
Yeah, and so that's some pretty cool stuff. But their firm specializes in planning, space planning, physical planning of communities, as well as policy. And they've been working on a number of different projects with us, as well as areas in the county and throughout the state. I think they actually do most of the work for what's called the redevelopment-ready communities for the state of Michigan. I'd like you guys to talk about that here in a second. Actually, let's lead right into that, if you would. Talk about CIB, your firm, and the relationship you have with the state and how it helps communities working with schools and their partners become better places.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We've been around for coming up on 7 years, but myself, I was formerly one of the partners at LSL Planning, and we were the planners for many years for the city of Swartz Creek. So I'm very familiar also with the city, as is Justin from his high school days and college days.
Did you say that you actually knew Adam in a previous job that he was in here?
Yeah, I knew him when he was the intern, when Todd Mowry was the manager.
Wow, he's grown up
and
a
he
lot
was,
since then.
Yeah, and so is Adam.
Well, I started in the DPW, so there's a good chance I had to enter a room, empty the trash can, and bow out kind of thing. It's been 20 years ago, coming up on May.
Wow. But you were Todd Mowry's favorite. He saw a lot of potential in you, and he was obviously right, and which he is quite a bit. So we do have a lot of familiarity with the city, and we do quite a bit of work throughout Genesee County and throughout the state. Also, as Adam indicated, we're one of the technical assistance providers to communities for it's a Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and they have what's called the Redevelopment Ready Communities Program, and they want communities to become certified, and they have best practices, a series of best practices they want them to follow. And you're evaluated, and there are certain things that you may be doing well, other things not as well, and they bring us in to help them with the things that are still missing, the pieces that are missing, and they fund it too. They help fund it. So it's a really good program. We're working all around the state. We got a project even up in Ironwood, which is about as far as you can get. In the state, and we're also doing work for the city of Detroit, helping them with their redevelopment review process. We're pretty excited about the program.
Wow. Yeah, it's all over the place. We were just in the city of Hart on Tuesday, which is about an hour north of Muskegon on Lake Michigan shore. So we go where they need us.
Okay, so let me direct this question to you guys. Why is place important in communities, 2019, and how do you address that through efforts such as policy?
Well, I'll take the first shot at that. I think it's really it's trends, and it goes a couple of generations. We had the generation after World War II where folks wanted to move out into the suburbs and into outlying rural areas, and that's really continued up until the recession. I think the recession was kind of the turning point where folks started to realize two things. One is that we can't afford to continue pushing outward and provide all the public services that folks want. And the other trend is that, and it's really, we're seeing it on the baby boomer end and also on the with the younger folks, the millennials we call them, now aren't really interested in living out in the outlying areas. They want to move into vibrant, active downtowns and communities the way they used to be, where you could walk to places, including schools, for example. And so we're seeing that trend, and it's a national trend, and obviously it ties back in with the shopping that we're seeing, where folks are buying things on the internet instead of going to stores as much. but they do still want to buy in small specialty stores, which tend to locate in downtowns. So that trend, I think, has everything to do with how we're seeing redevelopment occur throughout the country, throughout Genesee County. And so it really creates a lot of hope for our downtown areas, especially like downtown Swartz Creek. That's what people want. And so there's a lot of demand, even from the development side. We're seeing developers, they want to do downtown mixed-use development. They're not as interested in doing new shopping centers out in the middle of an area that hasn't developed before.
Yeah, a lot of those are closing up. So, Ben, from the school standpoint, most of our buildings, a lot of the buildings, are built in sort of that traditional pre-World War II, just post-World War II environment. We've got a great campus. We're sitting in it right now, where you could easily walk from this middle school to the high school downtown, and then Cyrene, which is a neighborhood school. How is this factoring into some of the bond investment or policy decisions that the school is considering at this point?
Yeah,
This idea of place and schools having a part of the built environment.
Sure. What is really interesting is listening to Carmen talk. I'm a fan of an area of social research called demography, and it's really looking at how different generations of people and really groups of people shape economics and everything else that go on. And I know you guys probably deal a lot with that. My brother is a millennial, and it's amazing to him, our lives, or to me, how much our lives are different, because he was working in a job. He works for a pharmaceutical company. He was down in downtown Indianapolis working. Then he went out to, when he moved back to Michigan, he got a job, and he wanted to move into downtown Detroit. He bought a condo in downtown Detroit, even prior to everything really starting to come back as it is. And so I'm seeing that, and the millennials are a generation of people who are bigger than the baby boomers. And so they're really going to be driving a lot of this. So to get to your question, we're seeing our parents, who many of whom are millennials, really kind of starting to have that desire for community connection. There are a lot of suburban districts that have historically been very large districts, especially on the west side of the state, where they've kind of moved out and away, and they're kind of out in cornfields, and you're driving 10, 15, 20 minutes sometimes to go to your school. And we're seeing this younger generation really want more of that community, where I have a downtown that's vibrant, I have a school system that's housing those events, and the school is, quite frankly, a hub for a lot of the community that in the events that go on. And so I think as we think about that with the bond, one of the projects that we have, which will open in fall of 2020, is our new multi-sport athletic complex. Athletics are not our primary focus here, but when you think about the community and what their number one visual experience with the school system is, there are thousands of our community members that gather, soccer, lacrosse, track, football. They're gathering at those events, and so we're excited. I think the community is really going to take a lot of pride and be very proud of what we're going to be accomplishing with the safety and everything that we're going to start first. That's our first focus. But when they see that that new complex go up in 2020 and be able to walk in and just say, this is where we gather as a community, we take pride in this. And we're seeing this generation, this younger generation, really, really craving that community connectivity, if you will. And so, Justin, I know you, used to even work in Swartz Creek at the grain elevator. I mean, what have you seen in terms of maybe the younger generation and really what they're looking for in schools for their own children?
So I think it's a function of amenities. They want to be close to things. They want to be able to have access to things far easier than having to get in a car and drive 20, 30 minutes to get to somewhere. Traditionally, if you think about it, back years ago, many of our major cities, every neighborhood had a school in it. And most of those neighborhoods were identified by the name of the school. And so they really were a central gathering place, a place to bring people. And one of the sort of tenets of the program that we're working on right now, the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, it's kind of a triangle. Business needs talent, talent wants place, place needs business. So if we can complete that circle, schools fall into that place. They help create that community. And the millennials and the younger generations are really looking for those places where they can have meaningful, impactful interactions on a daily basis.
So Adam, how does all of the work that CIB has done and continues to do, obviously it's great to have them here. I know they're doing a lot of projects around the state. How did they interact with some of the thoughts that you and the council have for kind of our city and what their vision is?
I mean, a lot of what they've been helping us with is technical. So if we get a group of folks together and the public is working with planning commission and council, and they say we want a vibrant downtown. Doesn't necessarily need to be big or expand, but it needs to have some more activities or businesses that we would like to have access to. And so they'll look through the codes, and they found some stuff. Like we made it very difficult to have residential above commercial, or to even have outdoor dining and some other temporary sidewalk events and things like that. And so they fixed it. And that's great. A lot of it is trying to tie in some of the things we've talked about previously on the show, that sense of place, the community, because a lot of people will identify with the community because they live there. But again, they may live in Swartz Creek, go to church in Durand, maybe send their kids to a different school district and work as far away as Lansing or Auburn Hills, or both, sure, if they're splitting a commute. And so we're trying to create specific spots to create the social networking and the events that identify strongly with quality of life. And that's why we've begun the process of investing in streetscapes, public places like Holland Square, and that'll actually be happening this summer. And then the new relationship you and I have been able to forge is crucial. That one of the examples is working on Cyrene. Mm-hmm. It's a neighborhood school, and there's not many of those around in the county. In the suburbs at least, and obviously with the bond improvements and our efforts, we're reconstructing Helmsley Drive this year, as well as Fairchild that connects the high school and middle school. And so we've had a lot of conversations about safe pedestrian access, working on safe routes to school, lighting, but still trying to accommodate parent drop-off, which is tremendous, when it didn't used to be in the 50s. And so those conversations coming into the placemaking have been crucial because we see it. I mean, that's one of those features, kind of a pointed question to you based on some of the stuff I see out there and here. A lot of these, I think millennials did buy homes in Winchester Village because that was a neighborhood school, and they have some concerns about the potential that there might be this restructuring of going from K2 to 3.5 instead of K5. And that might have been something that might not have come up as a big deal in the 90s, perhaps. But now you see that with different demographics of folks seeking different things out of their neighborhood. What is the school looking to do to potentially accommodate that or address that concern of not being able to use that school for walkers and be their nexus for that age group?
Sure. Well, Cyrene is a prime example of a school that has a large percentage of our students that walk, and that's a desirable thing for a lot of people, and so we want to continue to make that a possibility in the conversations we have, regardless of what. Number one, we're continuing in the same structures next year, but in the future, as we talk and we continue to examine research on things, we need to look at how would a school placement, because we're not going to be building new schools, right. They're way too costly to build. So how do we continue to make it possible for them to have a semi-walking experience and then being able to pick them up and take them? The transportation routes and everything are really a critical piece. So there's a lot of work to be done on that, and we're not in any rush to make a decision, but we have to always keep in mind how does any decision that we make impact the community and the walkers versus the kids that ride the bus. But one thing we know, and you'll even see this in the design when we start, we're going to be doing all of our lots, because drop-off and pickup are extremely difficult. And as a parent, trying to get in and out of that lot quickly, these schools were built at a time where everybody rode the bus. There were no people driving their children to school. Right. And now even people who live a mile away from the school where their child could walk, for whatever reason, are bringing their children and driving them and dropping them off. And I've seen a real shift in that. And it's a really interesting thing. I'm reading a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, and I'm having our board actually go through it. And it talks about this safetyism kind of belief that we have to protect our kids from everything. And so the interesting dynamic is that as crime has systemically dropped and gone down, we're seeing the safety culture even rise. So even though we have less crime than we did in the 70s and 80s, sure. We're seeing parents that are fearful of allowing their children to walk maybe a mile to school, whereas before that was a no-brainer. So, Carmen, in your experience in working with all these communities, have you seen similar trends in that, where people are saying, hey, we used to walk, we'd like to have all these walkable places, and now my kids, they're not safe, or there's a danger out there, and so it's almost this fear that's not really backed up by a lot of data. I think we hear about stuff more now because of social media and information, but it's really kind of interesting. And so in your work and in your experience, have you seen those trends?
Well, I think that it's so difficult now because we went from having neighborhood schools where everybody walked to now, because of the suburbanization, and if you look at most school districts, they're no longer small neighborhood schools. They're much bigger schools, and they draw from a broader geographical area where you have to do more busing, and it becomes challenging to try and move back in that other direction, although it's what people really want from a planning point of view, and it's a really good idea. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge because it also goes back to, you need to have financial sustainability. And if you look at budgets around the state, it's not the townships that are having the financial challenges; it's the villages and cities that are under budget constraints because of the recession and
state revenue sharing.
Yes, there's a number of reasons, but if you look at the budgets of all the cities and villages, they're tight. They don't have a lot of flexibility, and it's very difficult to get the new financial growth. I think eventually it will work out with the trends we're talking about, but whether it be schools or the local government, there's a concern about financial sustainability. And one other point I'll make about education is, because we've done a lot of work for 25 years, let's say, in the city of Fenton, and everyone talks about, what a great downtown we have and all the things that are going in, and it really looks so easy, when in fact it really, and I think the city manager, Lynn Markland, and I have the same belief on that you get the good community before you get the good downtown. So, people don't just come there because of the downtown. People come there because of the school district. The school district's faring very well. If you look back 25 years, there were challenges that the school district had to face and decisions they had to make. And if you look at even the physical development of the city, it's a much different looking community now than it was then. So downtown is in large part, a result of the great school district and the great improvements that have been made throughout the city.
Yeah, this is part of that triangle I think Justin was
Yes,
talking about.
exactly.
You got to work on all those components at once, and so.
But see, you know this well, and you're doing it good here. From our perspective, there's sort of a process for making things work in cities, communities, you name it. And the first is to establish an overall vision. You have to have that vision, and it has to be unified from the city to the schools to the churches to the nonprofits to the neighbors and the residents. And then you have these policy tools that you can put in place, like your zoning ordinance, like your economic development strategy, like your plan that you just went through and bonded for, and then you can start to really implement this vision. And I think that's what we're most proud of as a company is these communities that we work with. We're actually seeing them implement this vision, that they're putting in place, which is tough, like you said, with budget constraints, but those communities that have been frugal and manage their resources well are sort of seeing that fruit blossom now.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, is just being change agents, and affecting change is different than planning. And to be honest, planners had a bad rap for just planning for a long time, creating the document that sits on the shelf, and I think you guys have a different track record. Question that just popped into my head. How much risk do you think is involved for a community to really thrive and be able to affect change? In your view, when you go back, you're looking at, say, a Fenton 25 years ago, or us today, or a school district that's making a decision 5 years ago. Can you really be super conservative and find success? I'm sure you can. Or to what degree is risk a component in affecting change?
I think it's both. You have to be willing to get off the sidelines and do something. But again, it comes up with the vision first. So you have to find your creativity and get that, put that in place. If you're not willing to change, we see this a lot in communities that never build anything new ever. We see one of the trends that's happening right now is there's a massive shortage of housing for middle-income America. Those folks that are making and living off $40,000 to $80,000 a year. The housing market is just not there for them. And some communities that we work in, we have builders that want to come in and build this type of housing, but the community is so anti-different housing type than a 2,500 square foot on a half acre or 3/4 acre or 1 acre lot, that they're kind of shooting themselves in their own foot, because they could be bringing in the next generation of community members, but because they're so anti-change and won't take that risk, then they're just kind of sitting idle.
Well, I know you both have a lot of experience in our community, and I'm very confident. I'm proud of our staff. I think we're doing our part the best we can. Our community put their faith in us, and we did pass this millage, and we're going to continue to get better. So I'm excited about that. I believe the same thing is true about our city. But one of the things I see is we have 2 exits off of an expressway. We have a lot of developable land. We have a big project going in just to the west of us. We have a lot of potential. Where would you guys, if you could give us an honest, raw assessment, where do you see Swartz Creek? And obviously you've got Fenton, which has been developing for 25 years, and you guys they had struggles like Creek did at one point. Mm-hmm. Where do you see Swartz Creek in terms of our potential and some of the maybe challenges or possibilities that we face as a community as we continue to try and get ourselves to thrive and be vibrant?
Well, it's funny because I can point out a number of communities that have the building blocks for the types of things that many folks are looking for, especially in traditional downtown. But what it really takes, it has more to do less with the physical and more with the operational philosophical views of the communities. The successful communities have 2 things that I see. One is they have leadership. Disagreements can occur and so forth, but in the end, the leadership agrees to work together, and they build a consensus, and they work together, and they move forward. The second thing is they look at the types of things that we're talking about, not as expenses, but as an investment. There's a big difference there, okay? If you're somebody that looks at your retirement as an expense that you've got to throw money at versus something that's an investment for a long-term benefit in your future success, totally different view of things. And it's the same thing with communities. Successful communities view the money that they're putting into things like whether it be zoning amendments or coming up with creative new financing plans for economic development, or acquiring property that they know they're going to need for development in the future. Those are the kind of activities that are looked at as investments, not expenditures. Mm-hmm. And the successful communities do that. And the unsuccessful communities look at it in a different way. And they have, they might have a council or board where people are arguing publicly all the time. Mm-hmm. And if you're an outside investor, and whether it be a home buyer or somebody who wants to put a business or an industry in a community, and you're seeing this go on, they know that. And they're not going to want to invest where their investment's going to be at risk. Mm-hmm. So conversely, and that's where I think Swartz Creek has a real leg up on a number of other communities, is that this view is an investment. And I've got a great example here, and then I'll let anyone else talk that wants to. When the old City Hall, the one-room schoolhouse City Hall, was being replaced by the current municipal building, we had a lot of discussion about what to do with that property. And they actually had, I think, a church come in and want to buy it and keep operating it as it was. And I very loudly recommended, no, let's tear the building down, let's create 3 building lots, and let's support the neighborhood. The number of cars and vehicles and so forth that are going to come into the neighborhood it's not good for the community. And rather than take the money, you can make more money selling it to a church. up front. But if you're investing, it's not inexpensive. You're investing in the neighborhood, then let's get that redeveloped for housing. And they did that. And the council made a conscious decision to invest in the neighborhood and to take less money in and to have single-family housing built in there to stabilize the neighborhood.
Wow.
You'll be glad to know that sentiment remains today. I don't know if anybody on council today has been there that long. Maybe one, I'm not sure. But the point is, so many communities, like you said, townships, they have a lot of area. They'll go out there and just create new tax base to stay financially solvent as a goal to try and achieve some vision that they have. And I think cities, and Swartz Creek included, learned long ago that you need not grow or change because it's unsustainable by definition to forever be in that mode. To have yourself be sustainable and create a quality of life. And I think those decisions going back, that's been about 18 years, just so you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this.
Yeah, time's flying.
Wow.
But those council often looks at those decisions now as, money is a means to an end. If you have it, you can do some things which should create quality of life. But if you've got a decision right in front of you that's quality of life versus money, they've learned from some of those decisions that you indicated to pursue quality of life. And I think that's where we're at as a community. In Genesee County, you're not relying on growth to be able to support future services or create new resources. Change, I think, is inevitable. And I think there's a good leadership all around the table to ensure that as change occurs, it's quality of life change and sustainable. As it happens, I think one of the struggles of the community now is there is positive or negative pressure to change a lot if some things happen in the greater area that could create a big demand on the community to, expand or develop it.
Well, and I think some
of
of that, you'll see some of that pushback is legacy, right? Each generation puts their thumbprint on the community. And now as these new younger generations are coming in, they're wanting these different, vibrant places, like we talked about in the beginning of the show. And there are some folks that believe that their legacy is changing. But as long as you can find ways to honor that and respect that and know that it takes a village really to build a community, right? You got to have everybody involved. And so regardless of the change that occurs or the growth that happens, as long as the community stays whole, it will always be reflected.
So I know we're running short on time and we have to kind of close up. I'd love to hear maybe just from the three of you some specific ideas or things that our community might be able to see coming down the road specifically over the next year, 2, 3 years with regard to our downtown and also beyond as we consider some of these principles that you're talking about.
Well, I know we have some more changes to the zoning ordinance that we're making right now. That will help sort of create the framework, as we talked about, to implement the vision. So that'll be exciting. We should have that all done in the next 6 months or so.
Exciting zoning. So you're talking to planners now. Talking to some serious planners. I know a lot of the stuff we're working on, recreation-based. There's investments. The city's spending money, some discretionary funds it didn't previously have the ability to do, and a lot of that's on recreation, trailways, some downtown public spaces and items like
right?
that. Yep. The leadership supports that, I think, all around, including the business leadership, because that's one of those where it is viewed as an investment. I like the retirement analogy because older communities just struggle. I think the generation that came through in the 90s and early 2000s wanted everything new and fresh and out into the suburban horizon. And now you kind of have a sought-after vintage community, a genuine community, like walkable downtowns, buy a house, it's 100 years old, fix it up type thing. And so some of the stuff we're doing is what I call the meat and potatoes of government. We're providing the services we're supposed to and rebuilding our streets and infrastructure and giving people the security and tangible benefit of paying taxes and having those at their disposal, and then taking that extra step to ensure that 50 or 100 years from now we're still a vibrant community of people, socially integrated, that has these amenities they look for. And I think a lot of that is, quite frankly, the recreation and experience of life. Especially millennials now, they have a sanity that insults people, and that they want to enjoy life and work, and not just work for some sought-after retirement, which of course has value, but you can see the balance we're trying to create. And so in the next 2 years, we do have the trailways and a lot of investment in downtown coming online, in addition to some of the stuff that we are doing in due course, the streets and water. So,
Great.
And it's important, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years to get that kind of wow project in downtown. To get that, whether and maybe it's a 2 or 3 story building with retail on the first floor, but get that in infill type projects, because once you get that first project in, and we've seen that in Fenton, for example, once you get that first project in, it makes it a lot easier to get the subsequent projects and folks to invest in something like that. And it's important to keep authentic, to not put buildings in that don't belong here. And Adam has talked to us about that, about what's appropriate for Swartz Creek. It probably not the same thing that's appropriate in downtown Fenton or Flint or wherever. Maybe it's a little different, but getting that first project, and there's plenty of developers out there, and there's financing tools. So getting that first project, I think, is going to have a real big impact on development of the downtown.
That's awesome. I certainly have loved just this conversation, kind of thinking about what our next steps are as a community. It's great to have really the great expertise of a company such as yours. As we're kind of signing off here, for anybody that's watching this podcast that has more questions, or maybe they're watching from another community and would be interested about your services and kind of what you do or the projects that you provide, up to you guys. Would you like to share kind of your contact info or how to get a hold of you, or maybe just a short blurb on how people could get in touch with you?
Well, we obviously can be contacted through Adam, which is going through the city. We do have a I think probably the best bet would be to go through email, and just because even if you call us, at times it's tough to get us, but we're always watching our email when we're traveling too. So
we do have a website. It's cibplanning.com.
Okay.
So you can go there, and we're always happy to talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being with us today, Adam. Anything else?
No, for our listeners or viewers, if you like something you saw or hated or you're livid about a comment, go ahead and contact us at City Hall. You can call us 635-4464. We're there. Because we are expected to lead, but we've got to have feedback, and it's got to be genuine.
And for those out there, especially the younger folks, volunteer. Because it's time for that next generation to start working their way up and becoming leaders in the community, whether it be on planning commission or one of the other boards.
Create
and then
the community they desire.
Yep, and work their way up to the city council. It's very important.
Absolutely. We always need more leadership. Well, it's been a pleasure working with you gentlemen this morning from CIB Planning. Reach out to them if you have any other questions. Also reach out to Adam and myself if you have questions about any of the comments from today. We hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll be seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.